Now I'm going to take a look at the case when the economy is in a recession and the Federal Reserve wants to use an expansionary monetary policy to try to guide the economy back to its long-run potential. So when it comes to open market operations, the Federal Reserve would want to buy bonds. By buying bonds, the Federal Reserve is pushing money into the banking system, and so the banks will have more excess reserves and therefore have more ability to lend. When it comes to the discount rate, the Fed would want to lower the discount rate in order to expand real GDP in time of recession. In doing so, the banks would be more willing to lend up to their max. And similarly, with the reserve requirement, the Fed would want to lower the reserve requirement to implement an expansionary monetary policy. This would allow banks to convert required reserves to excess reserves and then have more ability to lend. Let's take a look at how the Fed would use these tools to fight a recession. So we'll show the long-run potential in the economy with the long-run aggregate supply curve, and we'll call that potential Y star. And currently, let's assume that the economy is in a recession such that the current level of output Y is short of the potential Y star. The Fed's looking at the economy. They see that the current level of output is short of the potential level of output. Unemployment is high. So let's look at how they could use expansionary monetary policy to close that gap. We'll use two side-by-side graphs here, one of the money market and one of the demand for investment in the economy. In the money market graph, the supply of money is fixed, so we'll draw it perfectly inelastic, and the demand for money is downward sloping. These things intersect at the nominal interest rate. And in the demand for investment graph, we have a downward sloping demand to show that the amount of investment demanded in the economy is sensitive to interest rates. When interest rates are high, businesses tend to invest less in capital equipment, and when interest rates fall, money becomes cheaper, and that encourages businesses to invest in capital equipment. So given the current interest rate, we can bring that over to the demand for investment graph and call that the current level of investment in the economy. But given the fact that we're in a recession, the Federal Reserve feels that that's not enough investment, or that there's not enough consumption also, to have the economy run at its full potential. So the Federal Reserve is going to take an expansionary monetary policy. They're going to buy bonds. When the Fed buys bonds, that increases the excess reserves in the banking system. And in doing so, moves the supply of money to the right. So in my graph, if I move the supply of money to the right, I see that that results in a new equilibrium interest rate that is lower. So when the supply of money shifts to the right, interest rates fall in the money market. And when the nominal interest rates in the money markets fall, that lowers all interest rates in the economy. So I can bring the interest rate over here to the investment market. I'll see that that should result in more capital investment. So lower interest rates would lead to increased capital investment, and they would also lead to increased interest rate sensitive consumption. Things like cars and refrigerators, large ticket items that people tend to borrow money to buy. And that, in turn, will shift aggregate demand to the right, since aggregate demand is C plus I plus G. In my graph here, if I move aggregate demand to the right, see that would result in higher prices for the economy, but also increased output. And you can see the Fed is achieving its goal in this graph of reducing the size of the gap between the current level of output and the potential level of output. So when the aggregate demand curve shifts to the right, this is going to lead to an increase in the price level, an increase in real GDP, and a lowering of the rate of unemployment.